Dr. Thomas Maples, and welcome back to A Sacred Journey. I'm very grateful that you decided to join me here today as we explore the myths, the fairy stories, and even stories of religious significance and maybe quotes that call upon our psyche to realize its full potential. In today's episode, we're going to explore perceptions of happiness, especially as it relates for our capacity to find inner peace in the dark meadows that may ultimately, at times, call upon us to traverse. Now, as a psychotherapist with 20 years of experience practicing, I find that creating inner happiness is a process of wandering the dark meadows of perception. We may not know where we're going. We may ultimately be lost. But in the capacity that we have to find ourselves, we ultimately develop the courage, the grit, and the capacity to not only amplify our self potential, but grow from those experiences in which we ultimately may find ourselves. I have often been drawn to a very famous quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson who states, quote, "Many eyes go through the meadow, but few see the flowers in it." So how does this affect our perceptions of happiness? How do we begin to perceive things in a way that may create a little more joy in our life? Especially as we learn to traverse the dark meadows that environmental situations can create within our lives. Now, in what often seems like a foolhardy journey to find balance between work and play, responsibility and fun, family and personal interests, and to create harmony within, we often seem to be pulled by two equally opposing yet entirely dependent forces that vie for our daily attention. These forces are equal in weight, yet they fight by nature. It is our job to balance our inner needs, desires, ambitions, and the dreams we strive towards with their sibling rivals. That is, the responsibilities, the schedules, the environmental pressures that are placed upon us as a means to help us grow within our capacity to solve more difficult intrapsychic problems that help spur self-realized development. Now, as human beings, we all have the capacity to procrastinate. When we begin to look at the conflicts that exist between intrapsychic and interpersonal, environmental, or genetic structures, is this a form of procrastination? Are we trying to develop more information to have greater understanding? This is quite possibly so. Is it giving in or giving up, though? I don't think so. As we begin to advance one day at a time, if not one step at a time, we create the capacity to learn the art of the shuffle. We have to move out of our boxes that contain us as a means to develop further growth within. For if we never leave the confines of our own home, or we never leave the confines of the room that we create, or the confines even within our own mind, we can never grow from the experience the environment has to offer us. This is part of the art of cultivating happiness. We got to bring forth those moments where we step outside of the box so that we could create clarity within experience. We could create balance with engaging something new and unknown. And we could still create a sense of drive. Maybe it's inner ambition, or it could be external pressure that pulls us out into this to engage the wonders of the universe, including the flowers within the meadow that Ralph Waldo Emerson speaks of. However, in order to perceive the flowers that are there, we first must get to know consciousness. Consciousness is an aspect of dualism. What is it about the two sides of consciousness, that dualism, that so eludes us as we strive to develop inner balance and open our lives to the peace, joy, and happiness we are capable of finding within? To be conscious is simply to be aware. But to be aware, we also perceive things by what they are versus are not, what they have the capacity to become versus what they are now. And it's a forward thinking perspective that is really steeped within past experience of the individual who perceives either its beauty or its absence. And so there's a dichotomized split that's present within the psyche that ultimately calls upon us in a journey, if you will, to actualize and mend its split nature. As we learn to mend the split nature of consciousness, we ultimately engage a journey to actualize ourself, our capital self, especially as it relates to the ego-based small self we create to handle day-to-day affairs. This journey is pulled by the two sides of consciousness, self and self-construct, self and ego construct, our desires, ambition, and the lofty dreams of self that call upon us towards moments of reverie. They invite us to engage a place where we could see some distant apparition of ourself in the future, which somehow has, up to this point, possibly escaped the reality of what we have created. But this absence of self, this capital self, is exactly what calls upon the ego to get up and get to work to create its image in the present moment at some point in the future. Now, while it may not be reality in the here and now, they exist, and through perseverance, they will find fruition in our lives at some distant point. There is no more excellent example of this than in those rare but sometimes enlightening moments of deja vu, when we may experience occasionally that sense of "I've been here before." However, what lies within this phenomenon, as the self strives to become whole with the self-concept, is that aspect of what we yearned to become, but maybe we're realizing this in the moment. The small self is a concept akin to Freud's idea of the ego. It is commonly linked to the masks or the personae we adopt to handle social expectations, social positions, and the need to be identified and labeled, ultimately to fit within the hierarchical system in which we participate. What self am I to become? Capital Self. And how does this relate to my current reality? In this question, we will often find those hard to find flowers in the meadow, those ghosts in the machine, or even the hot glowing cinders left over the heap of ash that Cinderella tended to, and that we have ultimately created in our own life. Now, to realize self, to find those perceptions of happiness, may be an elusive yet dynamic state. Much like happiness, it is cultivated through virtue. It's cultivated through vision and nurtured into reality. As in life, we are called to find ourselves, and no sooner do we begin to ask the questions that help us to find ourselves, then we are faced with the equally opposing yet dynamic forces that play upon the soul, the psyche, to promote continued growth by engaging in a dream that has yet to be attained. An example of this: as I awakened to get ready for the day, no sooner did an inner sense of the rhythm of passion ignite the dance within my soul to find health, balance, and wealth during the closing of this year, than when a second, equally opposing voice arose, telling me every reason why I should wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to create healthy habits in my life and going to the gym. Many of us may face this as the new year arises. We may want to change old habits and adopt new habits. However, the old voices do not go away. They simply have to be encouraged and slightly transitioned with a healthy love for a new storyline to engage self in a more realized state than where it is in the moment. In the example I gave, you could see a clear devil's advocate present. What route should one take? Should they take the route of ease, or should they take the route of pain and suffering? I believe that there is no correct answer here because it ultimately has to traverse both sides of this coin. We cannot come to a place of paradise without first pushing through the hell of the dichotomized splits we create within the psyche as a means for consciousness development and psychological growth. However, we also can't continually push to the extreme of the painful route at the expense of seeing the pleasure that life creates from within. And so, while psychoanalysts drew attention to the capacity the psyche has to depress, ultimately it's through that depression that one pushes through to the acceptance and the reformation of the psyche into a more neutral state that can allow for happiness moments to occur. In creating happiness, we must strive towards cultivating the meadow of life so that we can nurture those flowers, those ghosts, those spirits, those cinders that will one day become the moments of joy we traverse when we find the reverie of our own winter's night, especially in old age. In spring, we face a time for rejuvenation, new life, new goals, and new dreams. But spring cannot spring forth without the cold, dead hand, leaveless trees of winter. While spring may be a time for a rebirth, allowing us to rekindle old dreams, friends, and ambitions that may seem once lost, it's in these moments of reflection that winter offers us that allows us to create the dynamic movement needed to engage spring with a sense of newness and a sense of joy to come. While there is no one answer about ways to find happiness, one thing I do know as a psychotherapist with over 2 decades of experience is that it is a cultivation process. As you strive to find balance, you will be met with equally opposing and conflicting themes. This is just the nature of psyche, the soul at work. The dynamics present within the psyche, those polarized themes, help create the avenue that we can engage psychological growth. As you reflect upon things this winter that are ready to be let go of, see if you can't make room in your life. See if you can't maybe compartmentalize some of those things in a way. Maybe they need to be buried, or maybe just let go of the energetic response the emotions have in which you placed upon them. See if you can let them go, because ultimately this will give you a little bit of room to create space for the dynamic growth present within spring, when something may arise that could be more of a calling or more of a passion. Finally, remember that as long as one foot goes before the other, you are in the process of walking through the meadow. Maybe you can see a few budding flowers when spring arises, especially when you aren't, maybe you're not as caught up in those things that at one point weighed you down, and you're able to let go of the thoughts that gear in that direction, rather than being able to see the flowers in the meadow. As always, I want to thank you for joining me here today, and I hope you found some kernels of wisdom here in your plight to examine, chart a course, and advance confidently in the direction of your dreams. Goodbye for now, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment below. Thank you for joining me.